Welcome to the Racer X Exhaust Podcast, brought to you by Yoshimura. I know, dark times for American Motocross. Team USA absolutely got hammered at the Motocross of Nations at Redbud over the weekend. And I don't mean hammered like me and the 60 other thousand people there. They were actually probably the only people who weren't doing any partying. They were probably ducking their way out of there. Luckily, it was cold, so they could probably put hoodies on and jackets and sneak away. No celebrating for Team USA. That was shocking. We've discussed this at length on our race review podcast over on Steve Mathis's show, the Pulp Network. But I don't think anyone thought Team USA would not even be in contention for the podium, would be battling to just try to get top 5 in a single moto. It makes absolutely no sense. Remember, in 2016, Team USA seemed like the best team there. They didn't win because Jason Anderson got landed on after winning a moto. 2016, Tomac wins all 4 motos at the USGPs he ran. He won a moto at the USGP that they had last year. Yes, Jeffrey Hurlings blew everyone's doors off at Ironman, but Hurlings is super. To think that Team USA was, struggling to get top 10s in these motos, it was just shocking. And there's a million reasons or excuses or theories. I don't know. We've discussed this at length. Let's cheer up the best way we can with a trip to Las Vegas. Best way to do it. So this is cool. We've got the Monster Energy Cup, as is tradition this time of year in Vegas. And this time, the AIMExpo trade show has ignited and united with the Monster Energy Cup. So this is going to be a really cool show. I'm bringing on Larry Little, who helps run this AIMExpo trade show. Now, you might not know what the trade show means to you, and you might not care. But this podcast is something you want to listen to because it is run by the Motorcycle Industry Council. That's the dealers and the manufacturers. They're all together in this trying to sell more motorcycles. We very rarely in this sport have conversations about people actually purchasing bikes. Who purchases them? Why? What are the challenges the industry faces? And what is the industry doing to try to solve that? So I love the AIMExpo every year. I don't own a dealership, so for me to come and see the latest parts, that's interesting, but that's not my livelihood. I go there for the conversations with smart people who have lived their life in motorcycling, and I try to pick their brain as much as possible. And now that I have a podcast, I get to do that today with Larry Little, one of the most informed people. So you're going to learn a lot about the behind the scenes of trying to sell bikes, the challenges, and the solutions. Big thanks to our sponsor, of course, Yoshimura, 63 years of research and development for 4-stroke exhaust systems. Check them out at yoshimura-rd.com and check out racerxbrand.com and type in exhaust in all capital letters. You get 20% off your order. We, however, cannot sell you any of the beer that we planned on sharing when or if Team USA won at Redbud. I think the beer is in our former employee Jordan Roberts' garage now. We didn't know what to do with it. We were there ready for a celebration that never happened. But again, let's cheer up. I've got the perfect thing to do it. Here it comes. Ready? Here we go. Podcast. 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 Podcast, 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 podcast. Oh, man, my voice hurts. I hosted 10 hours of a live RacerTV.com show at Redbud. That hurt the voice maybe 10%, and the other 90 was just from screaming with the fans 3 nights in a row. That was really fun. One other promo, this Vegas weekend jam-packed with the AIMExpo. Go to AIMExpoUSA.com to find out about that. If you're there for Monster Cup, you might as well check this out too. We also have our live show, our Pulp MX Racer X live show Friday night at the Space LV. Go to thespacelv.com. Tickets are $20. You get to hang out with me, Mathis, JT. It's like a live Pulp show or a live Racer X podcast where we argue about things. Do you think we have things to argue about after Motocross of Nations and then the day before Monster Cup? Lots to talk about, and you will let you ask questions. I've also heard Ryan Villapoto is going to come so he can make fun of Mathis. Damon Bradshaw is going to come so we can all just admire Damon Bradshaw. It's going to be awesome. So thespacelv.com, get your tickets, 6 p.m. Friday night. to 7:30 p.m. Friday night. Join us there. We've also been teasing all this info and showing you all the info on the RacerX social media channels and on the racerxonline.com site. So figure out what to do, where to go. I just told you. Be there. Now to my interview with Larry Little, and I start the question with this. The AIM trade show started in Orlando. We were in Columbus, Ohio next year. So my first question is basically, do you just have to go to Vegas? Is it inevitable that every trade show go to Vegas?
Well, I mean, as you say, we were in Columbus last year. We launched in Orlando. We were there for 4 years in Orlando, probably a year longer than we really wanted to be, but we established the show there. And Columbus, the move there was to really get closer to the heart of the dealers in this country, because there's over 40% of the brick and mortar retailers are within 500 miles of Columbus. And so, but we also knew that West Coast dealers have a hard time, getting off the West Coast. And so we knew we really wanted to have something on the West Coast. And when we got a hold of Feld, because traditionally our date when we were in Orlando had been exactly the same weekend as Monster Energy Cup. So we basically got a hold of Feld, a little over a year ago and said, hey, are you going to continue to do Monster Energy Cup? And they said yes, and said, well, we have an opportunity to put AIMExpo on the same weekend as Monster Energy Cup, because I think that's better for the whole industry, because a lot of guys did the trade portion of Orlando and then immediately jumped on a plane Friday night so they could get to Vegas for Saturday night that were in the moto side of the business. And so that was one of the two motivating factors, is to create more than just the show, but also have other events. And that's kind of what's led to Power Sports Industry Week, the creation of Power Sports Industry Week, having to be able to work with Feld on Monster Energy Cup. And then we knew the promoters of Las Vegas Bike Fest, which is basically a V-twin consumer event that's in its 17th or 18th year. And it's downtown in Vegas, and it has international visitors. It's got a good following. They have about 30 to 40,000 visitors that come in for that over the same 4 days as AIMExpo. So their date was actually 1 week prior to ours historically. So we met with them and said, would you consider moving your date? And they did some homework with their key constituents, and they said, yeah, that absolutely sounds like the thing to do. So we've been doing key co-promotions both with Las Vegas Bike Fest and with Feld as well. And the third element that we pulled in was the Las Vegas Ride for Kids ride, the charity ride that's for kids with brain tumors. That, as you know, been involved with that organization, I think for 14 years. I've been on their board since when I was at Cycle World, and we were helping them. But their ride, I think, was traditionally a week after what our dates was going to be. So we met with them, and they absolutely wanted to participate. So we have all this stuff going on, and so it creates a little bit bigger picture of power sports, not just for the industry itself, but for Vegas itself. And we were able to meet with Clark County, which Vegas is a part of, and we were able to get a proclamation out of them declaring the week of the show to be Power Sports Industry Week in Las Vegas. So we're pretty excited about that, because in the big picture, between all the fans that will be at Monster Energy Cup, all the folks that will be at Las Vegas Bike Fest, and all the attendees that will come to AIMExpo, there will be close to 100,000 people total. And some of them will be going to multiple events, but there will be about 100,000 people total that will be interacting with all the events in town. So it's really pretty cool.
Yeah, and the Las Vegas Bike Fest, that's like a Sturgis or Daytona Bike Week type thing, just in Las Vegas, right?
Yes, exactly. It's a V-twin kind of event, biker kind of event, but it has a nice international feel to it as well. They get a lot of folks that come in because it's Vegas, and they rent bikes and they go on rides and that type of thing. So and basically the promoters of that event are the promoters that put on the SHOT Show and other things. So they're heavily entrenched in Vegas, and that's why they've been able to be successful for 17 years with the event. It's a cool event because it's down on Fremont Street. It's down in that neck of the woods. It's a totally different vibe from what we'll have at the racetrack at Sam Boyd or at the Mandalay where the show will be. So it's kind of cool. So we got different elements of Vegas, and then we also have a number of vloggers that are putting together rides. I estimate we have a vlogger coming in from Red Rock Harley Davidson on Saturday morning, and not that it's a Harley ride, it's just that's an awesome place to stage a ride. We'll probably have 1,000 bikes coming in on that ride alone, and we'll probably have 400 or so coming in on Sunday with the Ride for Kids ride. So it's going to be pretty visible. Power sports will be pretty visible in Vegas over the weekend.
Okay, so now you have this giant group of people to pick from Monster Energy Cup fans and V-Twin fans. Was this something you recognized that the show needed to give it a boost? Or has the show been growing pretty well on its own, even in the other cities that you visited?
I think it's some of that, but I think more holistically it's about, AIMExpo is a platform to promote the power sports business. And that's why we want to have a power sports industry, because it promotes more about power sports across the board, whether it's to the industry or the consumer. The idea of the show and the concept of the show, which is, pretty much based on the European shows of, EICMA or Intermot, where you have your media and trade days, and then you open it up to consumers so they can see all the new product. I mean, it wasn't rocket science to create the kind of show that we wanted to create from a platform perspective. It's just that it was new to the market, and it's grown every year. It hasn't probably grown as much as we had expected at first, but the business has not been as strong as it's been in the past years either. It's kind of interesting that, especially on the motorcycle side, the ATV side-by-side markets have remained pretty strong with the continued introduction of new product in that market, and more players getting into it, and it's actually helping a lot of dealers on the profitability side. But on the two-wheeled side, on the motorcycle side, we're at that point where we have new riders coming in. It's just not as many as we need from a new vehicle perspective from the OEMs to look at from their new vehicle sales, because they've pretty stagnant, since for the last 10 years, since the little bit of recovery that we had following 08, 09. I mean, it hasn't really gone anywhere, and some of that has to do with demographics, obviously, and I think it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition, because the RV market is taking off. It's had its unbelievable best years that it's had, and that used to be a really similar market to the power sports and motorcycle market, but they've been able to successfully bridge that transition to the millennial buyer, and they're taking a lot of pride in the fact that they have a lot of millennial buyers, because they've created an experience that the millennials relate to. And I think that's where we have our work to do, and I think that's where the show can help, catalyze the industry and hopefully understand that, there are things that we have to do to make sure that we show what an experience motorcycling is to get the new buyers in. And the other thing we need to do is recognize also that as we do a lot of work to create new riders, there's already a lot of new riders out there, because price as an entry point isn't something that the industry talks about a lot, but we have a number of exhibitors who bring in product from, the Chinese and other product that are bringing it in, and that product has gotten immensely better. And I talked to one of them the other day, and they're able to sell, 50cc scooters to college kids for $1,200 to $1,500 retail out the door, where a dealer is making a pretty good margin on that, probably more dollars than they're actually making on some of the more expensive bikes from the more traditional manufacturers. And I said, well, how many, do you have an idea? Because they're not reported in industry statistics. And he says, we estimate that between all the people like us that are bringing them in, and these guys are pretty well-known distributors in bringing in product, and they said, we estimate there's probably close to 50,000 units a year being sold that aren't even being recognized. And these are people that are actually swinging a leg over something that has two wheels and a motor on it that we're not really interacting with. And they're buy it primarily because it's cheap out of pocket and it's transportation. But we should be able to go that extra step and go, okay, they already know what riding is, so let's get them excited about continuing to ride, after they get out of college. So there's a lot of stuff out there. In the show this year, we're actually going to have a dealers-only luncheon on Friday we're going to have a keynote for that. This guy named Nick Gray, who spoke last year at the MIC's annual symposium, and he was a breath of fresh air. He's marginally been on a motorcycle, but he basically, what he's done, he likes going to museums. He lives in New York City. He likes going to museums, and he thought the museum tours were just so awful. He basically did a hack of a museum tour where he basically hired actors to come in and talk to people, very, very forcefully about what they love about museums, and you should too. And it's a much different experience. He's been very successful in this business. And when he spoke to the group last fall, to the MIC Symposium, everybody was like, wow. So we got him as a speaker to talk to dealers on Friday at this dealers-only lunch about understanding that if you're going to get a different kind of consumer to come through your front door, you're going to have to create an experience for them. And what is that, and how can you do it, and how can you integrate that into your store? So I'm looking forward to having a great turnout on Friday for that from dealers and just imparting a lot of knowledge. And that's, as I said at the beginning, that's kind of what AIMExpo is all about, is just creating knowledge, not only just for the dealers, but as a place for the whole industry to get together and exchange knowledge about what the challenges are. And it's really as much for the industry to hear from the dealers about what their challenges are as our ability to help provide solutions for them.
Right, and that's what I love about this, because we know that this kind of started with the bones of the old Indy trade show, or real old schoolers will know it, I think it's the Cincinnati trade show. And it was just a place for dealers to come and see the new products that they wanted to have on their shelves. And that is certainly still a big part of the AIMExpo. But I feel like also there's a much larger goal, a bigger picture thing of just letting people talk about the industry and figuring out our challenges and demographics. And these are not conversations that we're having in the 30 motocross and supercross races I go to, man. We're just talking about, right, who's trying to win races. We're not talking about bike sales or anything like that. So I like that part of this show.
Yeah, well, I think having the consumer element attached to the show creates a much different context than just the old dealer show, because now you've got the opportunity, and, make no mistake, it's easy for somebody to put a press release out about a new product that gets picked up on all the websites, and, that I've seen the new product online, but what we found in our surveys, especially on the consumer side, is after the show, when we survey them, the one thing that stands out about, going to a show is the face-to-face contact. And consumers go, it was so good to be able to talk to the company that built the product and talk to the person that designed the product to hear why he did it and why they did the things that they do. And I think that's the different context that beyond just the dealer component of the show, when you add the consumer element on top of that. And I'll tell you what, the smart dealers, they hang around on Saturday and Sunday during the consumer days to find out what consumers are really interested in, because that's kind of that's doing a little research for what they think is going to sell in their store next year.
Yes, and you're switching it up a little bit. You've got this new thing called motoculture. At least I think that's a new thing, right? That's a new thing. So just explain what motoculture is. Well,
we had a thing called custom culture for the last couple of years, which was more of a lifestyle, V-twin kind of lifestyle. It was more about builders creating custom bikes. And they were all over the map. It wasn't just Harley stuff. There was custom Ducatis and custom vintage bikes and, resto mod stuff for the motorcycle marketplace. All over the map. It was really cool. But it was pretty narrow from the standpoint that it was more about builders than anything else. And it celebrated motorcycles, don't get me wrong. But what we wanted to recreate now with motoculture, it's basically all these different segments of motorcycling being celebrated. I mean, we've got, urban, we've got the Orange County, there's a group in Orange County that rides Groms and Z125s and the like, and they're called the OC Goonies. And we've got the Vespa Club of America. We're going to have a display on urban riding, which has become a real big part of the industry. If you talk to the Yoshis of the world, these guys they traditionally have built a lot of stuff for sport bikes and moto, the number one selling products they have right now are for Groms and Z125s. So there's a real that's not been recognized on a mainstream basis. So we want to have things like that, the dirt part of the market, the adventure part of the market, and just different market segments that'll be anchored by different folks that can talk to consumers and just share the experience. And so within that whole area, it's kind of a mashup of all these different things. We're going to have the one cocktail bar will be on the show floor, because it's a nice area to enjoy yourself. We have our big sponsor nationwide is putting an espresso station in there as well for espresso. So it's going to be a cool place to hang out at the show, and it just really speaks to all the fact that power sports has all these different components, and you might be familiar with one, but you might be interested in seeing how the other side of all these segments lives as well. So it should be really, really cool.
Well, yeah, they should all get along, because if you look at the 70 or 100-year history or whatever it is of motorcycling, I always say we used to start with just a motorcycle. And then you could maybe eventually take that motorcycle and make it a little bit more versatile to ride in the dirt or race it or cruise on it or whatever. And then eventually they just started making cruiser bikes and touring bikes and dirt bikes and motocross bikes, flat track bikes, whatever, right? So we specialized the entire market to the point where now the original idea of a motorcycle is you can just have fun with it, do whatever you want. Those bikes are gone. I always visit my uncle in West Virginia, and he loves collecting 1970s Hondas. And there are just these tiny, like, mini trails and SL70s and 125s. I don't even know what they're called. But I just know you can ride it on a farm, you can ride it on the grass, you can ride it on the road. It's easy to work on. It's cheap. It's just a fun motorcycle, right? So, and then I realized, wait, they do actually make these. It's called the Honda Grom. So, shocker that's very popular. I'm amazed. A non-specialized, just fun, cheap motorcycle.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, we've got other manufacturers in there as well that have product coming in that is even cheaper than those. It's basically the same thing, and I think it's not intimidating. It's not heavy. It's not big. You know, it's very accessible, and I think that we have to understand that. You know, that's a key moment in the marketplace to understand that. You get somebody on one of those, and you know, eventually they're going to want something with a little more juice and a little bigger that they can go anywhere on. But you know, as you say, yeah, over the last basically 110 years, you know, we've gone from you know, a motorcycle that did everything to very specialized, and we're finally, hopefully, the corner's turning a little bit, you know, back toward you know, more accessibility than we've had in the past.
Right, because I'm pretty sure, I'm not an expert like you, but you can draw a pretty parallel line to motorcycle sales cratering at the same time the economy started to tank, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, there's no question about it. And, you know, a couple of different things happened at that time. You know, 06 was probably the peak, and 07 was just a little off of it. But there was a lot of dealers in this country that had gotten into the business because it was easy money. You know, all these units are being sold, and you know, so all these dealers got that set up that, you know, got in for not the right reasons. You know, whether it was, you know, whoever it was, but you know, the fallout from that was those were the first guys when business got tough. They weren't prepared and they went away. So I mean, between 06 and 010, we probably lost 35% of the dealers in this country, both franchised and non-franchised, because at one point there was about 13, almost 14,000 retail outlets in this country, and it's down to less than 10,000, about 10,000 these days between franchise and non-franchise. So you've got about not quite 5,000 dealers, brick and mortar outlets that are franchised to sell new product, and the other 5,000 are, you know, service or aftermarket or accessory, like your cycle gears and that type of stuff. But the guys that are left are smart. They stuck around because they had invested in their businesses, and I think that's the reason I have hope for the longer term for our business is because our retailers that remain are smart. You know, we've got new product coming in the marketplace at the very lower end. A lot of people like to talk about the millennials, and they're an important demographic, but so are, you know, Gen X that are older than them. The baby boomers still have a place, but quite honestly, the demographic category that I'm most excited about is what we call centennials, which is the oldest of which right now is just turning 20. So they're just coming into the marketplace. You know, there's new product for the young ones these days, as you've seen the Stasic out there, which is basically a Strider with an electric motor on it. Those guys killed it at the show last year. I mean, there's a Harley dealer in Columbus that we worked quite closely with on the local scene back there last year. This guy named Bob Altoff that he owns 3 dealerships in town. He put Stasic in his Harley dealerships because his grandkids love the things, and he's got all these older Harley buyers coming in that either have kids or grandkids that he's able to sell these things to and get the next generation started on something that's got 2 wheels. And it's very easy. And the best thing about it is, like when I was growing up, you know, if you lived, you know, on a cul-de-sac, it was okay to ride your mini bike on the cul-de-sac. Well, not so much anymore because of the noise and the perceived, you know, not being cool anymore. But these things, which are basically Striders with electric motors, don't make any noise, and they give the kids the experience. So I'm real excited where there's another electric vehicle manufacturer that's got small bikes that's coming in this year for the first time. So that's why I have a lot of optimism. But I think the struggle we're going to have is from the youngest generation, filling that hole that's kind of in between at this point.
Yes, and that's the point I'm trying to get at here, Larry. So we can draw a line saying the motorcycle sales went down with the economy. You can argue, but it's pretty obvious. I think it's pretty fair to say the economy has rebounded. The economy is back. It's very strong from where it was 10 years ago. But motorcycle sales, right, they have certainly not rebounded in lockstep.
Exactly.
So that's the issue. We got a disconnect here now.
Yeah, the other statistic that's pretty amazing and what's harsh from our perspective is that consumer confidence, as measured, every quarter, every month, I think it is measured every month. It's its highest point since 2001. I mean, it's for whatever the variety of reasons are, I don't care, but we should be doing better than we are with consumer confidence at, a near all-time high at this point. So that, we do have work to do. We do have work to do, and that's, coming back. That's really where the show comes to play. I mean, we're going to have as on our opening session before the doors actually open to the trade on Thursday. We're going to have we had invited Secretary of the Interior Zinke to speak, and it looked like he was going to be able to do it because the MIC is very involved in this outdoor recreation roundtable that he created with all the different constituents in outdoor recreation, and we're there on behalf of Power Sports. It looked like he was going to come, but something else came up. So he's sending his I think the guy's title is Senior Advisor for Outdoor Recreation, Senior National Advisor for Outdoor Recreation, a guy named Rick May, who's actually, it turns out, is an enthusiast, to speak about, the importance of outdoor recreation to the country and basically how we fit as a business in outdoor recreation. They just sent a press release out last week that Power Sports represents about 20% of outdoor recreation, which is a big number. It was like $20 billion or something like that. It was a crazy number, the way they measure it.
Yeah, I saw that. But there was a press release, and it's going up. And that was an actual government commission study, not just us and our own industry pumping ourselves up. It was like an independent third party saying this, right?
Yeah, I mean, I did look at the MIC's new unit sales for off-road and especially competition. Competition numbers last year were up from it's dirt competition, so all the bikes that are classified as competition bikes, and most of them are moto bikes, but they actually increased a little bit last year from 49 to 50,000 units sold in 2017 versus 16, and they're actually up another 1,000 units through the first 6 months of this year, up to about 28,000 units for competition. So there is one part of the market that actually is doing a little better year over year, and it's in the competition side.
Oh, well, hey, that's the Racer X off-road competition. That's our market, right?
There you go. That's why I looked it up.
Oh, you're good. You're good. That's good research. Okay, so for consumers who want to come to the show, tell us why, if they're in town for Monster Cup, why this is better than just visiting a big local dealership for them. Is it just more stuff? Is it the rubbing elbows? Is it just the industry insight? What's up with that?
It's all the above. All the above. I mean, with I think we're going to finish out at just about 500 exhibitors with more than 20 OEMs, and the rest are aftermarkets. Some are service providers to the trade side of the business, but it's always kind of interesting for a consumer to stick your nose under the tent and look at a part of the business you'd never get to see otherwise. But it's just all of that in one place at one time, and that's been our story since the beginning. You get to have everything is in one place at one time. And, from a consumer perspective, as I mentioned earlier, to actually be able to talk to a company that produced a product that you might be interested in, or see a product you didn't even know existed, that's kind of cool. I find that myself every year when I walk the show. I go, wow, I didn't know anything about this. That's pretty cool. But you get to talk to those people. And then we actually have, the demo ride area, AIMExpo Outdoors. We're going to have 9 manufacturers with demo ride capability, including Polaris' Slingshot. You can't actually do a demo ride itself because what they're doing is akin to drifting the thing, but you can be a passenger in it with one of their pilots, which is I can't wait to take a ride in that thing and do that. So there's a lot of that, but what's really cool is that it's everything power sports, and Feld is actually going to be running shuttles from AIMExpo on Saturday afternoon over to Sam Boyd Stadium for Monster Energy Cup. We're actually closing the show early this year on Saturday simply because the Monster Energy Cup's going on. We're going to close the show at 4 on Saturday afternoon, where we would normally be open till 6. So there's a lot. There's so much, and if you go to the front door and you buy a ticket, it's $16. But if you go online, you can get one for $14, and there's a number of companies that are pushing out codes for even less than that. So stay attuned to social media, and you'll see a number of that stuff. But AIMExpoUSA.com is the website, AIMExpoUSA.com. Or Moto Show Tickets is actually an easier, and we got that URL that takes you right to the ticket site. So MotoShowTickets.com. But yeah, there's so much. There's just so much at the show. I mean, it's hard to get through the show in one day, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I mean,
as you know.
Absolutely, yeah. I've been there every year, and for sure, it's a lot of walking. And I guess you could say it's like going to 5 dealerships or 10 or 20 or something like that. So you're not going to see that at home.
No, not at all. And for us this year too, this is the first year that we've had both. Well, it's the first year for Parts Unlimited and all their brands to be at the show, and and Tucker is also coming. So we have the number 1 and number 2 distributors with all their house brands at the show for the first time, and that's going to add a lot to the show from a dealer perspective, but it's going to add a lot to the show from a consumer perspective because we just hadn't had those brands at the show previously. So we're looking forward to, they're taking up quite a bit of display area. There's a lot of brands that are going to be at the show that weren't there for the last few years.
Yeah, and also because of Monster Cup being in town, now you're getting a lot of the riders who weren't there when you were in Orlando or Ohio. So that's a big bonus for fans that can come too, right? Yeah, they get to see those guys.
True. So we actually, I know for sure Suzuki is going to have the teams signing, both the road race and moto teams signing on Thursday during the trade days, and then they're going to come back on Sunday for the consumer day on Sunday. Obviously, it's going to be more difficult on Saturday with the race for the moto guys. But we actually are calling Sunday Suzuki Sunday because they've made a big commitment to have all of their athletes there, and it's going to be fun. We're going to have the Yosh truck, the Yosh road race truck there the whole time during the show. The JGR, the Auto Trader Yoshimura Suzuki factory team truck is going to be there on Thursday during trade days, and then they're going to pull out of the show on Friday and Saturday to be at Sam Boyd, but they're actually going to come back in for Sunday. So consumers will be able to get a look at both road race and moto rigs. They're going to be set up on the show floor.
Yeah, well, Chad Reed will be there, right? So you get Chad Reed's autograph. That's cool. Okay, so here's my $1 million idea. You mentioned moto culture and an espresso machine, and you fell right into my trap. I've got the $1 million idea. I'm going to give it to you for free. Are you ready?
There you go. Bring it on.
Okay.
Bring it on.
All right, this is what I like. Here's the idea. These days, tons of people work from home. They work at coffee shops. I do that a lot myself. Look, I don't have any particular alliance to Starbucks. I don't need to support them in any way, shape, or form. I like motorcycles. I would love to be able to go to a motorcycle shop, buy a cup of coffee there, support them, and hang out with people I know, have some conversations, but really just have a Wi-Fi and a desk and be able to get my work done and maybe be around some stuff that I think is cool. And that's the thing, man. Everybody thinks motorcycles are cool. Even if you're not a motorcycle enthusiast, no one would see motorcycle decorations or artwork or anything like that and think this is lame. So, and hey, by the way, when you're there, you might not buy something all the time, but eventually you probably will buy something, right? So if you just get these people in the shops to hang out, who knows what comes next? That's my idea.
Sure. There's actually kind of I won't say it's underground because it's not, but there's this kind of unseen movement that's going on around the country called the community garage. And it's basically what you just described. It's a third space. They have the espresso machine. They got Wi-Fi. But they have, it's almost like a club that you can join, and there's different ones have different levels, but You can store and it's good for the urban, especially for the urban areas, because you can store your bike there. You can work on your bike there. There's tools there that you can use depending on your level of membership. And so that's actually there's a growing community of these community garages across the country. And it's pretty cool. It's a third space, and it's very millennial from the perspective, but they're capturing a lot of other people as well. And I think exactly what you just described as a place to be able to get Wi-Fi, to hang out. I got an espresso machine, and it's an environment I'd much rather be in than a Starbucks. Quite honestly, if you have any inclination toward moto at all. So yeah, that's something you should take a look at some point, and I'll get you some more information on it because it's pretty cool.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Plus, people could help me work on stuff because I'm terrible at it. So use the community there, and I see this happens every once in a while. So my buddy Grant Langston, we announced the Nationals together. We have lots of downtime. We chat. He owns a shop out there in Southern California. And he says every Friday, these like three old guys come in and they just hang out, and they just want to hang out with his dad. So they sit there, solve the world's problems, talk about motorcycles, and eventually, hey, they'll buy something.
Oh yeah.
But you've got to you got to make it inviting.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion for dealers in general, is to create that space, whether it has some vintage bikes on display, whether it's so it makes it comfortable to be there, and have a lot of dealers nowadays do have a bigger space that they have set aside for local clubs and that type of stuff. But I think that what you described is more, it's basically Starbucks without the Starbucks. But it's in a much nicer setting. I'd rather be where you can smell the rubber and the oil and the gasoline.
Okay, now look, there are changes happening. I didn't even know about these community garages, but I know where all the blame comes, and there's change. You blame it on millennials and four-strokes. Millennials and four-strokes, right? Just a blanket statement for all problems that we have in the world. But if changes need to come, community garages, Starbucks inside a shop, and less pressure with sales or whatever, is this something traditional dealerships understand, or are you having to teach them?
Well, I think that what I think is going to happen is the visibility about what the community garages offer, and basically, it's like I say, it's the concept of a third space, which is where you go to where there's no pressure to do anything but just sit there and be there and use it as a place to be. But I think as the smarter dealers understand, that the reason these community garages are popping up is because they relate better to that particular demographic and how they consume. Because, one of the things that this Nick Gray guy will talk about to the dealers is millennials are all about experiences. They don't collect, it's been famously said, they don't collect things, they collect experiences. Which is, when you boil it down to the very baseline, that's kind of, if you understand that, then what you have to do is, to get them to walk in the door, there has to be some experiential level attached to it. And I think that when the dealers understand that, I think the more progressive dealers, yes, they want you to buy something, but I think they're going to understand it's worthwhile to set aside the space that's more welcoming. And hey, I can come in for a cup of coffee and maybe chat up with somebody that has got a similar interest as me, and not have to worry about, if somebody is going to sell me something because I walked in the door. If they create a space for that and it's a known area, I think that can be a win-win for everybody. Great. It's a great suggestion on your part for the mainline dealer to do that.
Well, I have to admit, I actually stole it. So my buddy Jason Hooper owns a bicycle shop in Hickory, North Carolina, and he has that. And they have beer taps. They straight up have beer taps at the parts counter. It's awesome. So you go in there. I'd rather hang out there than a bar, right? So you're hanging out. Next thing you know, you're 3 hours into the process, and it's just like hanging out at a bar, and you're around people and stuff you like. So I stole the idea. Hashtag bikes and beer. They use it all the time. Something encouraging. You told me last year the motorcycle industry has been through tougher times than this, and they've solved this problem before. Talk about the old Discover Today's motorcycling thing and how they fixed this in the past.
Yeah, there was a kind of a different economic play back then, it's a pretty, I'll try and encapsulate the story as best I can, but in the early 80s, there was quite a big turf war going on between Yamaha and Suzuki, and one year I was actually at the Suzuki dealer meeting where I forget his name, the U.S. president, the Japanese president of the U.S. operation, basically put his fist on the table and said, "Next year we will be number one because we're number one in all these states already. Next year we'll be number one." Well, that was, you don't kick Honda at that point. So they all basically went into this flurry of R&D with these new products and all these products, and they just jammed the pipeline full of these products because they thought they were going to sell them. And I forget what year it was. It was probably about 83, somewhere around there. The dollar and the yen valuation got upside down from the Japanese perspective. So all of a sudden, these products that they had engineered and product planned to sell for, say, $3,000, now because of the exchange rate, they had to sell for $4,500 or $5,000. Just killed the market because the price value thing got way out of whack. And what happened was that sales got driven down for that reason, for the insurance challenges back in the 80s, where the insurance companies didn't understand just because you had a motorcycle didn't mean you had to pay a lot more than your car insurance for your motorcycle. So there's a lot of challenges. But in about 86 or so, the industry got together and said, "Hey, we need to do something." And one of the things they did was recognize that the number, if you did a LexisNexis search of news stories for the word motorcycle, it had more negativity. It was 85% negative in any of the mainstream news stories about motorcycling. It was higher than the tobacco industry. No, it's in the 80s. And so what happened was they went on Discover Today's Motorcycling was created to basically identify mainstream journalists who would be able to listen and tell the story that were they were either riders themselves or were open to learning to learn to ride and understand about it. So fast forward 10 years later, the stories went from 85% negative to 75% positive, and the number of stories about motorcycling, I think it tripled or some nature. I can't remember the exact number, but yeah, we've done it in the past, And so what we did, one of the things we did, worked with Feld this year and created the Ride Initiative at an industry level, and it was kind of just a first foray into seeing if we could expose 2 and 4 wheels to a younger audience. And so working with Feld and the Monster Jam, the truck events, the Monster truck events at, I think, 6 or 8 of their locations over this year, we set up this thing in the pit party that they had and offered kids and even some adults the opportunity to try out mini bikes for the first time and small ATVs, so the kids got an exposure. It was a pretty labor-intensive effort to do all that for the amount of throughput, because their pit party really isn't open as long as you would like it to be, and there's other distractions. And I think the pit party is only open from like 1 to 5 or something like that. It's less than Supercross is, and so there isn't a lot of throughput, but it gave us a lot of good information about how we can look at stuff down the road and what can we do from an events perspective where events already exist, and maybe add a component on that it can expose people to 2 and 4 wheels.
Okay, the next thing, we blame millennials and 4-strokes for everything, but I do hear some people, they pin it all on phones. Motorcycles are not as popular because now kids are obsessed with electronics and screens, and that's all they want. So is this a fight not even worth fighting? Are we just screwed? Kids have phones now. That's all they care about. They don't want to ride motorcycles?
Well, you can look at it either way. Phones are either, the bane or the opportunity. And I think that what somebody has to do is harness, the attention span to look up from the phone and get somebody to consider doing something. And that's, it's as much up to the parents even when you grew up, when I grew up, it's as much up to the parents to be able to create the environment where you need to look outside instead of just being inside. And I think the real challenge today is that parents there's so much going on from a parenting perspective, and you're a parent, you know this, and so it's easy to let the phone distract while you get something else done. And I think the challenge is to make it easy for parents to have their kids have an experience that's different than a phone, and show them that the value of doing that. And that's kind of what we're trying to do with the Ride Initiative. But that's just going to where the people are and maybe not expecting to see you and going, we should give that a try. So we'll continue to work on that. But as I say, it's either an opportunity or a bane. It's like you said, it's like four strokes.
There we go. We just phones and four strokes. We'll just keep going back. Maybe that needs to be a hashtag too. Okay, back to the trade show idea. Again, the old Indy trade show was big. But did it have any of these extra components, these symposiums or workshops and things like that, like this one does, or is this something relatively new to the industry?
Well, I know the MIC used to do their annual meeting there, but at the Indy show, but it didn't include the scope of stuff that we're doing, whether it's the hardcore dealer education, whether it's talking about the issues and bringing in out. They had some keynote speakers, but I just think the times were different, and there wasn't as much, up to 07 and 08. There wasn't as much, this feeling of we got to do something as there is right now, and so I think that's made it. I won't say easier for us, but we recognize that that's kind of our role as the industry's platform to get together. I mean, this is it. I mean, we don't have any other place where everybody in the industry is invited to come and take part and engage with their counterparts in all aspects. And like I said before, it's not just about trying to help the retailers understand what's different, because they're on the front lines. We also want to hear from them about how we can help them, because at the end of the day, the motorcycle dealership, that's the face of our industry. That's where a consumer interacts with us, and so we want to make sure that whatever we do, we can make those retailers as successful as possible, but also help them relate as much as possible to today's consumer, because how people consume is definitely changing. So you need to make sure you have a reason for somebody to come in and walk through your door, and when they do, provide that experience for them. But yeah, I mean, it's a much different platform now than it was 10 years ago at the Dealer Expo.
Another thing that would seem obvious is the online retailers. It's the same thing against any brick and mortar store in any industry. I would have to think that is making an impact on brick and mortar motorcycle dealerships. I mean, you need to have those in town. That helps expose the sport to people. So is that something that is being recognized, and is that an obstacle to the industry right now? Is that something that people are worried about?
Well, certainly. And, before there was ever such a thing as a website, there was a thing called mail order, and
right.
It was the same thing, and we've dealt with that as an industry for 40 years. I mean, I remember when I sold ads for Cycle World back in the 80s, and those were our biggest customers, were the mail order guys, and it's still a component of the business. It's just that it's all one thing now. It's how you order. So it's been a challenge for dealers all along. The good dealers have their own websites and interact with the consumers, their local consumers, digitally. There's a number of our seminars for dealers talk about social media, because that's really the new way to communicate with your customers. And so I think it's just going to be a continual education. I mean, everybody look at themselves and how their consuming patterns have changed, and not just for power sports, but just in general. So it's a recognition of, what kind of a unique selling proposition do I have to get a consumer to come to my dealership or buy online from my dealership as opposed to, one of the big online retailers.
Yeah, and now that I think about it, a lot of the brands have what they now call the MAP pricing. It's like the minimal price you can sell a brand's product for. So it's not like you can guarantee the big online retailer is always going to be cheaper and always undercut the regular small shop, right?
No. Yeah, no, not at all. And some stuff will be and some stuff won't. But there's always, where I hesitate to order stuff online is if it has to do with fitment. So anything that has to do with, apparel, helmets and apparel and all of that stuff, because quite honestly, it's a hassle to get it and it doesn't fit and it like you want it to, or it wasn't exactly what you expected it to be, then you have to send it back. And, generally you can do that for free in a lot of cases. Sometimes you can't. But if you go to your dealer and you go down there and you actually can fit the product if they have it in stock, and the better dealers have better stock of product. But that's kind of also what the show does. It's the ultimate showroom. It's like you said, it's bigger than any 4 or 5 largest dealers put together. So that's what the show offers, is the ultimate showroom. But we'll hopefully have the opportunity for dealers to really understand how to continue to compete, because it's going to be vital that we have brick and mortar retailers for motorcycling. And I suspect that over the next 25 years, it's going to probably change exactly what that means. I don't know what it is, but I'm excited about the fact that, motorcycling will continue to have a place in both the recreational and the transportation economy in the U.S.
Well, I told you, all we need. You just get bikes and beer and brews, coffee.
Yeah,
exactly.
Works for me.
There you go.
Works for me.
Right. So if we can get our beer and coffee at the shop instead of Starbucks or the bar, we'll all be happy. I've solved all the problems here free of charge. Just explain your motorcycling background. You're not some corporate suit. Just tell the people that don't know.
Yeah, and I won't disclose my age, but I've been riding for over 50 years, so it's been something that's been a labor of love for me. I've always felt like I was the luckiest guy in the world to work in the industry that I love. It's not really work, it's more about enjoying. I mean, it takes effort, don't get me wrong, but it's a lot better to come into a place that has motorcycle in its name than something else. And I'll always tell this story because it's a great story, because you mentioned Discover Today's Motorcycling as one of the things that helped the industry. So I was on the committee for DTM, as it was called, back in the I think this was the early 90s. So the Long Beach show, which was always a consumer show in Long Beach every year in December. So we decided we were going to have a meeting, because everybody was going to be in one place at one time on the West Coast. A lot of the people are in the committee. So we had a meeting at a hotel across the street from the Long Beach Convention Center, and I don't remember the name of the hotel, but I remember typical, meeting room. So you walk down the line and you look for your name on the door, outside the door for your meeting room. And I remember walking past one that said the American Pet Food Association, and I thought, but for the grace of God, I could be walking into that door and not one that says Discover Today's Motorcycling. So, yeah, I'm a long-time industry guy. I spent almost 30 years at Cycle World magazine at that place, selling ads originally, but then running it at the end, and then had an opportunity to start working on this project right from its infancy. So it's been a lot of fun, and it's more about trying to make the industry a better place than anything else, and that's kind of what gets me jazzed, is that what we're doing is trying to create a better environment for the industry, both to do business and to showcase its product. So, I love it, and that's what keeps me engaged in riding. I've been riding, my go-to bike these days is a Super Tenere. It's what I kind of want to be able to ride on, because I commute on it. I can go out on the weekends and do whatever I want on it, go wherever I want on it, but always looking for that next motorcycle.
Yeah, but see, the less specialized, Larry, the less specialized bike, you can do some road riding, some off-road riding. It's not hardcore in any direction. That's where the real appeal is.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in upstate New York, riding single track and having a dual, what was back then called a dual purpose bike, not a dual sport bike, but a dual purpose bike. The first brand new bike I ever bought was the SL125 Honda that I had at college, and so I had used bikes up to that point, but they were all basically enduro, dual-purpose bikes. So I'm a dirt guy, and even though I ride on the street more than anything now, I still like to be able to, if I want, just shoot down a dirt road, as hard as that is to get to here in Southern California. But
yeah, that's probably the part that's changed more than anything in this industry.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, so last thing, if people want to go to Monster Cup and then hang out, maybe Saturday they can go to here and then go to Monster Cup, or if they want to come Sunday, are you open late enough to, if people have hangovers, because they will Saturday night, the show will be open late enough on Sunday for them to recover and then come to the show, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the show opens at 10 on Sunday and gets over at 5. So No worries. I have plenty of time in the afternoon to come over to the show after you've enjoyed yourself Saturday night. And
right.
Please do. We look forward to hosting everybody.
Yep, it's going to be a good time. Thanks, Larry Little, for the time. And that's been your Racer X Exhaust podcast. Go to AIMExpoUSA.com for more information on the show. If you're planning on going to Las Vegas this weekend, make it the triple threat. Get Monster Cup in, get our live show in on Friday night from 6 to 7:30, and get in the AIMExpo. It's going to teach you a lot about the motorcycle industry, but most importantly, you get to see all of the cool new products and actually hold them, touch them, feel them, try them on, see what they really look like up close. Why not? Make a weekend out of it. If you want to check out our show, again, that's thespacelv.com, and they've got an actual link to the show. They got the Pulp logo, make me gag, right there. And buy yourself some Racer X swag. Do it with the exhaust tag in the discount code area, 20% off of your RacerXbrand.com merchandise. But most importantly, our sponsor for this show, I have to thank them every time. That is, of course, Yoshimura. Check them out at yoshimura-rd.com. I'm sure you will see some really cool Yoshimura stuff all weekend long and all of the various motorcycle things that will be happening this weekend in Las Vegas. What better way to cheer yourself up if you're a Team USA fan and you're depressed after what happened at Redbud? Vegas will fix it for you. Then you'll be depressed about what you did in Vegas on Monday. That's our show. Thanks to Larry Little, everyone at the AIMExpo. See you Friday night at the Space LV, and you'll listen next week right here on the Racer X Exhaust Podcast by Yoshimura. Thanks for listening.